Bookend, Gary.
Okay, the bookend for tonight. This is Wednesday, August the 14th, 2024. This is the monthly meeting of the St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group, SLUUG. Our speakers tonight, Lee Lammert, doing Chat GPT as a tool for fixing network upgrade problems. And our basic tutorial speaker is Ken Johnson, who's going to talk to us about KVM for beginners. So Ken is our secretary of this organization, and he's also been a longtime supporter of the group, including being a financial supporter and subsidizing, or basically keeping us running on Zoom. So we really appreciate all of Ken's efforts. And a quick announcement: most of you know, we have almost always been recording these meetings. So you can sign in with your own name, which of course we love to know who you are, or if you do decide to use a anonymity, a pseudonym, try and make it two names so that we can identify you from somebody else. In other words, if we all have Bob, too many Bobs, we need a last name or some kind of last designator there, just so we know who you are. One of the things is that's what generates the ability to vote. And so technically, if you attend two of our meetings in a calendar year, you're eligible to vote. So one of the reasons why we try and keep track. With that, and also if you have any objections to being recorded, I guess you can let us know now, or if there's an whoops during the meeting, perhaps it's possible for us to edit it out before we post it permanently, but that takes some effort on someone's part, usually Stan. So we'll try and do it if we can. That having been said, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Ken, who's going to tell us all about KVM for beginners.
Okay, let's see if this works. Offhand, I'd say no.
Got your screen, Ken.
Yeah, but not the screen it's supposed to be. Oh. Well, let's try again. I wasn't expecting it to well, this is rather a bother. I'm using Impress, and I tell it, run the slideshow, and it shows the slideshow on one of my screens, and I share that screen. And at that point,
you might try sharing the monitor, Ken.
the slide.
The other thing, if it's changing screens on you, is start it and just make it, don't go full screen, but resize the window to the size of the screen, if that makes sense, and see if you can share better.
Well, I don't know how to do that with the slideshow for Impress.
Worst case, just leave them in Impress and show that screen instead of doing the F5.
All right, so my options are screen one, but in the little preview, it doesn't when I go to say share a screen, it's wiping out what was there. And then if I select the screen that was on, then nope. Okay, well, let's see what other options we have. That's really a bother. That's actually a bother in a bunch of different ways. I think maybe what we ought to see to find out if no, that doesn't help. No. You know, I'm used to this working. I wonder if it would work better if I didn't use the app, but instead used the browser to connect to the meeting. Any
You
thoughts
won't
on-
you won't be able to share.
I see. So either I can share and it doesn't work, or I can't share. I'm, less impressed with Zoom than I used to be.
That's
I
one of the reasons we're
I haven't
doing
tried it in a while, but I didn't have trouble using the browser to share. It's been a few months since I did it, or a couple months at least.
Sean? What's your, at least I thought that was Sean that said it wouldn't work.
No, it was me, Randy.
Oh, sorry.
I was in a meeting last night where somebody tried to do a share, and they were in the browser version of Zoom, and the share was not present. Even as a co-host, he was not able to share. He finally downloaded Zoom and went from there. And the only thing I was going to suggest to Ken was make sure you've got the latest version of Zoom, because an old version of Zoom can cause a problem.
Could I ask what browser he failed with? Because I tried it some time ago again, but I did it with the Chrome browser, and that worked okay.
Yeah, I think he was in Chrome last night.
Okay.
The changes in Zoom have changed and have caused some other compatibility problems, and that may be one of them.
Okay.
But we're seeing your screen though. Can't you just drag your presentation over, and even if it's not maximized, just show the non-maximized version of the presentation?
Well, yes, but so that's what it looks like. You see that?
No.
No, we lost your share.
You're not sharing now. I was going to suggest the same thing as Sean. Run that in the window that is visible. Yeah.
We see your program,
see
your editor, and your document.
There you go.
Yeah, well, let's see here.
You're right back.
One of the things that you can do with Impress is that you can have notes that are associated with each slide.
Mhm.
And the difficulty with the approach we're taking now, of course, is that the notes are not visible. I mean, I can make the notes visible, but then the contents of the slide will become considerably
Probably
smaller.
Yeah.
Bother. So I'm working on an alternative to that.
So what happens? So we see it right now. So what happens if you do the presentation mode right now?
Can anyone hear Stan?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear Stan.
Fine.
Well, if I say,
Bummer.
No,
There, you're good. We got it. I think the key is to share first, then do the slideshow, maybe. That's
no,
my
no, that's not relevant.
got it. Okay, but we're good now. We see it full screen.
swell. Okay, so for the purpose of this presentation, KVM is the hypervisor support built into the Linux kernel and the user space components that enable it to be a useful tool. So if I say KVM, I'm referring to that group of software, that body of software. This is what I do. This is normally where I would talk about the experience that qualifies me for giving this presentation. I am, however, a recent beginner with KVM. I'll discuss why I got started with it, and I'll discuss in general terms a practical use case that does not involve running hosting services. I have previous experience with other virtual machine hosting mechanisms, Hyper-V and VirtualBox, but KVM was new to me until about a month and a half ago. So some things that we're not going to do. We're not going to do any demonstrations because I have a limited amount of time here, and that would just stretch it out. I will not be answering advanced questions about KVM or virtual machines in general, and I will not provide specifics for non-Debian systems. I'm not opposed to non-Debian-based systems, but all the Linux systems that I support happen to be either Debian or Debian-based directly or indirectly. So I'm not in a position to address specifics for other systems. So, saw that already. So why KVM? I needed to practice an upgrade. The customer who has this system that needs to be upgraded has assigned me a desktop system. It runs Windows. Windows has Hyper-V, and Hyper-V is great when it works, which unfortunately is about half the time. My observation is that on systems that are domain members with somewhat restrictive group policies, Hyper-V about half the time works, and about half the time it says, no, you're not allowed to do that, even if you're a local admin. So that was ruled out, and licensing for VirtualBox is a bit more complex in commercial applications, and I did not want to get into that. So roughly what we're going to go through tonight is preparing and installing KVM, creating a virtual machine, starting it, stopping it, looking at the status, and the most basic default networking. So here's some hardware recommendations. An Intel I series or Xenon CPU or an AMD CPU with VM support as kind of minimums. 16 gigabytes of memory and enough disk storage. You can probably get by with this, with less than this under some circumstances, but it probably won't be much fun. I know that other than for minimal laptops used for web browsing and maybe simple doc preparation, I personally haven't configured a system with less than 16 gigabytes of memory for 6 or 7 years. So this seems not ridiculous. It's, to expect that you would have access to something like this. Software on Debian or a related system, this seems to do the trick. At least it worked for me. It's just, a list of packages that you need to specify. Additional packages will almost certainly be pulled in to meet the requirements of these packages. And when it's finished, you should have what you need. However, you need to put your group into the libvirt, or excuse me, you need to put your user in the libvirt group. Otherwise, the virtual machine manager, which is a GUI application, will complain. Okay. So my suggestion is that if you're starting out with KVM, that you use Virtual Machine Manager, which is a GUI application, to create VMs. It was automatically added to menus in XFCE and in Bunsen Labs OpenBox, so probably it will just show up in your menu. And you select it and run it, and off you go. Whoops. There we go. So when you fire it up, it's going to look like this. And you go up to the file menu and say, create. I want to create a new virtual machine. And it will open a series of windows. There are 5 of them, in fact. This is the first one. And the first thing it wants to know is, how are you going to install the operating system? Because, excuse me, Virtual Machine Manager is going to work on the assumption that you're going to say, okay, here's my media, and I want to get started on installing it right away. I don't think that's a KVM requirement. I think it's just the way that this GUI app works. So you pick one. I think an ISO image is going to be pretty typical. You pick your architecture option, and next. Well, forward, I guess they say. So I selected an ISO. The server where I ran this is a couple versions behind. So I selected Debian testing as the operating system, since that was basically the newest version of Debian available in its list of options. And that worked, it turns out. So here I'm giving it 8 gigabytes of memory and 1 CPU. This system has 32 gigs, but it's not a super powerful CPU, so. Give it a disk drive. Give it a name, which in this case is template. The default network selection is NAT. It then shows you a summary of what's going on in terms of the operating system's Debian testing. You're getting it from an ISO. You've given it 8 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes of disk space. And then, of course, we just selected NAT. Well, we accepted the default of NAT. If you then hit finish, it's going to open a new window, which is basically the console of your virtual machine. In my case, the default was to boot a live system from that disk drive, it has several options. There's an install option, but the live one was the default, and I didn't get to it before it times out. So it booted up Bunsen Labs Linux, and you can see that that's, sitting in a window in the larger window of the host system. So that wasn't so bad, right? Now, this particular virtual machine probably isn't that useful to me, because the next time it boots up, it wants to boot off of the disk drive. And of course, because I booted the live image from the ISO, there isn't anything on the disk drive, but it demonstrates how this can work. Start, stop, and status. I suggest that you then now get into the habit of using the command line interface for these purposes. So if your virtual machine is not started, you can use virsh and start it up, and it will say, hey, I started that one. Domain is what it calls a virtual machine. To shut down a virtual machine, you would, well, if it's a Linux system, you're going to use shutdown-h or now, and then use virsh to turn it off. Again, that's really straightforward. And finally, you can use virsh to show what the status is of all of your virtual machines. In this case, there's only one. Its state is running. Now, you may recall that we selected NAT, networking, as our networking option. In this situation, what that means is that you're basically between your virtual machine and your host system, there's a NAT router. No, I take that back. There's a NAT router in your host system, and your virtual machine are connected to it. On the other side of that NAT router is access to whatever your host machine sees on its local network.
Would it be fair to describe it as your host machine acting as a router for the VMs that are running on it?
Yes, given that you also have the understanding that your host machine is also connected to the virtual network on the same side as your virtual machines. Because what you can do is you can connect from your host machine to your virtual machines using SSH or SFTP or other tools that use TCP/IP. So there are some commands for manipulating the network. The first one lists the networks that you've defined. In this case, there's just one, the default. The second command says, start that up by default so that I don't have to mess with that as an additional second thing every time I start up my VM. And the third one shows you the IP address of your VM. In this case, it's a different VM than the one I just created. But it shows the IP address. So if you want to connect to that Debian 12 KVM virtual machine, you just specify that 192.168.122.87 IP address on your, say, your SSH command line on the host machine, and you get connected. Your host machine seems to default to .1 on that same network. So you can initiate connections from the VM to the host. But nothing that is outside the host can make direct connections to the VM, at least as far as it's set up at this point. Let's see. So that means, for example, that if you want to, if you're doing some kind of work on the VM and you've got some result, you can transfer it back off to your host, or you can send things from your host into the VM, for the purpose of the work that you're doing. So in my particular case, what I ended up doing was creating a virtual machine, which I called template. And then when I wanted to practice this complicated upgrade, I would clone it and go until I had failed, try and figure out how to overcome that failure, throw the clone away, clone it again, and try it again using my slightly longer procedure, which would get me one step further along. So that's a way that the cloning can be useful for, my particular test case. Other ways that you might use this on a personal level would be if you wanted to try out a different Linux distribution, or for the distribution you're currently using now, suppose you wanted to try out a different desktop environment, but you wanted to avoid the possibility of inadvertently destroying the carefully crafted desktop environment you have now. So those are some ways that you can use this for those purposes. It's a powerful and useful tool. Simple applications with KVM seem to be, pretty straightforward. And of course, you can certainly take it further if you want. There's an article at the Debian Wiki about KVM. I found that useful to get as far as I have. And the PDF of these slides, including my presenter notes, should be up soon on the SLUUG websites. So, if there are questions about any of this, this is just a reminder of the areas we covered. This would be a good chance to ask them. Dead silence. Either I've bored you. Go ahead.
How does one set up the networking so that the virtual machine can be accessed from the WAN from the general network? So maybe if one was running a server inside a VM.
That's an interesting question. I regard it as beyond the scope of this presentation.
This is Stan. I believe the way you do that is in the networking, you turn on bridging.
That's one way to do it.
Right. This, as I said, it's a great question, but.
I would encourage you to ask the question on the discuss mailing list, and we can get into multiple ways of how to do it. It is absolutely possible. If you don't mind, I have an addendum to add regarding networking compared to VirtualBox or something else. And that is KVM leverages what I'll call standard Linux networking. So if you can configure something with ifconfig or iproute2 or just about anything else to configure networking at the command line, KVM will happily adopt and work with what you set up. I have found VirtualBox to not be that way. It's kind of a closed ecosystem buried deep in VirtualBox. So if you mess with a lot of things with networking like I do, KVM is a much more flexible interface. The KVM Vert Manager GUI is a little weird, but it can be made to work, and you can absolutely bridge guests onto your local LAN, or you can set up routing, so a whole bunch of different things.
This is Stan. Would you use Net Manager, i.e. NMCLI and NMTUI as tools for that within?
I believe you could. I've been doing this on Gen 2 and older Ubuntu for probably a decade, and Net Manager was not a thing at the time. But based on my observations, I will bet you an expensive fancy coffee that you could, if you can get Network Manager to do something with networking, KVM will very happily adopt it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This also is Stan. I'd like to point out the problems with Ken was having with sharing the notes and the slides is a matter of how LibreOffice is configured. There's an option in there that shows, I forget, I think it's usually F9 will turn on the way that it shows both of those things, and then you can jump from the small image to the notes and back and forth to the large image from when you're browsing through the Impress. It's a matter of how LibreOffice is configured, in my experience, anyway.
Andy, where that configuration is, Stan?
I'd have to go look for it. Let me go see here. Hang on. La-di-da.
You know, one thing I think is pretty neat is that command you had that shows the DHCP lease. I thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't know about that, and I don't know about an alternative, like a similar thing on VirtualBox for that either. So I thought that was cool. Because a lot of times you'll spin up a VM and you'll be like, all right, what's the IP address that I need to SSH into now, you know? And so being able to get that so easily is pretty nice.
I think you can get it out of VirtualBox while the VM is running. You can go into network properties or host properties and networking, and you can change a few things and see some DHCP clients, but it's, as far as I know, it is like 15 to 20 mouse clicks. And it's been probably 12 to 18 months since I did it last. I'll look on the machine behind me.
So, Ken, do you have any interest in like looking at some kind of automation as the next step? Like maybe, what was that called? Oh, Vagrant or something along those lines?
Well, no, not really. You know, I picked up using KVM because I have this particular problem that I need to solve. You know, I have this complex and rather ugly update or upgrade that needs to be done to a server. It has a lot of steps, and I need to practice them because putting that server out of commission is undesirable. If Hyper-V worked, I would have used that because the desktop that's been assigned to me at that customer's office is, you know, perfectly powerful enough to to be running, a VM in the background, and it's got plenty of memory. And I have very convenient access to it. Okay. But since Hyper-V didn't work, there was a second server that's the customer has, which is not very heavily used at the moment. So I figured, all right, I'll run it over there. And, once I get through this, I don't have, immediate plans for using KVM on any kind of scale basis, which I think is where automation would come in. I set it up on my server at home, as part of getting ready for this presentation. And I can think of a couple of things to do with it there, but they're mostly, they're all one-off type things, where I want to try out some new version of an operating system or that kind of thing. So again, no, I don't care much about automation at this point. I mean, obviously that could change in the future.
This is Stan.
Yes.
Stan, before your question, I just want to be respectful of our speaker's time. I know Ken's got to be someplace later. How are you doing on time, Ken?
I can be here a small number of additional minutes.
All right, Stan, back to you.
The answer to the question on Impress is you go into the selection for View, and in the menu you select View's tab bar. Up at the top where it says View, select that, go down to turn up, middle down, Views tab bar. Click, turn that on.
The normal outline notes.
When you turn that
off or turn on?
You turn it, you click on it and turn it on.
Okay.
And that gives you 4 tabs there, one for normal, one for outline, one for notes, and one for slide sorter.
Right.
Oh. Okay.
And also I would turn on that side pane while I'm at it. At least while I'm building something.
Yeah.
Under
well,
view side pane.
This is what I had been expecting was just to come in and run this, because I've, done this before and it seemed to more or less just work.
I thought the question was how to show your notes while we were going along. Anyway, somebody asked.
Well, so normally if I'm running a slideshow, there's 2 screens up.
Right.
There's the one that shows you the slides, and there's this second one which is showing me a small version of the current slide, a smaller version of the next slide, and the notes. And that's also where I, hit next or previous or whatever to control what's going on. But what I was having a lot of difficulty with in this case was that, I set that all up, and then I tried to share the screen where, the slides are, and it wouldn't. Anyway, anything else?
Hey, Ken, just for your, possibly help you out. I have that problem all the time, and I end up sharing one monitor, and then I just drag the presentation over to it.
Yeah, I don't know how to drag the presentation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had considered
I
that.
mean, this thing's here, and, but I don't understand it. I don't know how I can drag it over to a different screen.
Well, if you hit your Windows key, you get a minified version of every screen, and then you can just grab grab it and drag it to a different monitor. Now, sometimes that doesn't work if you've gone full screen on an application. Oh, and you're in Windows anyway. Sorry, forget it. Poor guy.
So
I needed a Windows 11 laptop. So,
Windows work, huh, Lee?
Say again.
So Windows doesn't work.
Well, I don't use it,
I know.
so I don't know if the recommendation I'm giving is applicable to a Windows environment.
Yeah, I don't use it either. I still got a Windows box here, but I haven't turned it on in a year.
Probably Windows 98.
I hear Delta Airlines is
When-
considering
when-
not
when-
using it anymore.
Last time I looked, it was Windows 11.
Oh, okay.
I've got a Windows 7 machine upstairs, which seems to be bulletproof.
As long as you don't run it on the internet.
It's been on the internet for at least 10 years.
Okay, since Ken only had a limited amount of time, let's stay focused on any questions that Ken may be able to answer in reference to KVM for beginners.
Barring that, maybe we ought to jump into the GUI middle, Gary.
I guess we will.
Before we go to the GUI middle,
Yes.
Ken, I'd like to say, as somebody who's been doing virtualization, multiple hypervisors, and KVM, I think you have a very good 101 level introduction that I think people could use as a base to get something installed and kick the tires and have a starting point, which I think that is exactly what you were trying to do. So,
yep,
you, sir.
yep. Well then, good night.
It seems
Will
like-
there be a video, not just slide presentation, but video as well?
Yes, that's our intention. I'll follow up on that just a bit more in a moment. Ken, before you leave, there's a question in chat at the very end from Nick. If you can read it, it says,
Hold on.
okay, I'll let you go. If you can't read it, Ken, I'll read it off.
Read it,
me
Gary.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one it is.
The question is, Proxmox is built using KVM and LXC. Will Proxmox VMs run directly under KVM?
No idea. Somebody else may know the answer to that question.
I would say that Proxmox is more a virtualization / NAS centric distro, and it uses KVM and Linux containers under the hood. So KVM running on the Proxmox distro will run KVM. Does that help, Nick?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, no, that does. I was always curious about that. In case Proxmox goes another direction, it's becoming very popular, but it would be great to know that you could simply, or maybe with some small modifications, convert your Proxmox VMs and run them just, directly in KVM.
Yeah. As a general rule, there aren't that many different hypervisors. There's VMware family, there's Microsoft's Hyper-V, KVM, VirtualBox, and Zen. Most things Linux-based that are wrappers around virtualization are probably wrappers around KVM or possibly Zen. So I would give it a 70 to 80% chance that if it's a Linux backend and it's running VMs, it's KVM under the hood.
Say, I have one last thing. Would the person who's going to take responsibility for putting the PDF up, either drop me an email or put something in Steercom that tells me who to send it to.
Just send it to editor@slug.org.
I can do that. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yay.
Ken.
Connected.
Okay, as I say, big thanks to Ken, longtime contributor to our group. Really appreciate his efforts. Let's see, with that, we are now in the gooey middle of our Oreo cookie style meeting. By that, I mean we do a presentation, the basic tutorial you just saw or heard on the front. We do a main presentation on the back. And here in the GUI Center, we do general announcements and a brief Q&A session. So with that, as far as general announcements, Stan, have we got some slides for this?
You would ask me that.
I would ask. In the meantime, I'll just keep yakking until I see something on the screen.
Can we jump to the newest Linux user question? And I kind of want to ask if I can play a Red Hat noob and ask one.
Okay, let's do that. We'll jump ahead first and do a little bit of Q&A here.
Okay. Red Hat 9.4. How do I rename a network interface instead of the ENS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I hate you name to VLAN 330? What is the approved current Red Hat method?
If nobody knows, maybe we better ask Chat GPT.
It is probably something in the Etsy. Haven't done this for a few months, but there's a I want to say Etsy sysconfig, the netconfig directory, and there's a text file in there that has the name of the interfaces.
Yeah. That harks back to what I used to do in the RHEL 7 days, but I found documentation from Red Hat that says that method is deprecated. Although it is the first thing checked.
Is this a GUI-less system, or do you have a GUI?
It is headless. I can log into it. Network Manager TUI is functional. I would really rather not deal with X11 forwarding and fire up a GUI, but if I have to, maybe.
Because I believe if you've got a GUI desktop on it, in the network configuration thing, wherever it was. Yeah, I don't have one. I had them all over the place before I retired, but yeah, there was an interface where you could set all of that by hand.
Yeah.
Well,
and you could do it during the install.
Grant, according to the docs, IP link set allows you to change the name. You might want to try it.
At many times on many different platforms. So let me refine my question. How do I do it persistent in the Red Hat methodology?
Okay. So you're saying IP link set is not persistent?
No, it is not. It alters the current running interface in kernel. The IP command period alters the running kernel. Nothing about that is persistent.
Okay, the second option is put device equals name into sysconfig network scripts.
Which I believe that's what I was referring to in the Etsy sysconfig thing. Or synonymous to it anyway.
The link Sean just shared.
So is it just the name that you're?
Yeah, I'm wanting to change the interface names.
Yeah, I noticed they changed the name from, I don't know, somewhere back in 7 to 8 and 9, somewhere around in there. Didn't like it, but I just said, well, I don't care. What's in a name?
Well, in some cases, it would be nice to change the name. That way, if you've got a set of scripts pointing at ETH3, you don't have to change the script. You can just change the interface name to be compatible.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, if I had a script that was configuring specific interfaces to do specific things, but
The use case that prompted today's question is a VM for a client that is going to have 4 or 5 interfaces. And I feel like VLAN and the number is a whole lot more descriptive than ENS 192, ENS 224, and some others yet to be added. Sean, take a quick look at the link you shared up in 1.1. And I believe it says that that is deprecated. Yeah. It uses a UDEV rule to reference the etc sysconfig network scripts ifcfg -* and it's saying the UDEV rule that defines that file defines that is deprecated.
What about the one about renaming the files in the etc sysconfig network? Is that I don't know.
Sysconfig network is pulled in via the deprecated method.
Gotcha.
At least that was my understanding.
I was thinking this looked pretty cool because it talked about like defining a schema and basically having it automatically assigned based on the schema. It looked pretty cool. They should undeprecate that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump back into doing the general announcements here, and then get a couple more Q&A before we go into the lead presentation. So jumping back.
Who are you?
I am the MC of the night. I'm also the president of the organization. I'm Gary Meyer.
Also has the longest beard.
Well, I don't know. You prune back some. So that other voice you hear is Lee Lammert. He's the treasurer of the organization. He's the host on Zoom, and he contributes a lot of our hardware effort. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The other voice you heard in the background was our vice president, Stan Reichert. Say something, Stan.
Something, Stan.
There we go. Stan takes care of so much. It's hard to describe, but he's a real workhorse in this group. So thank you, Stan. And let's see, Ken Johnson, who was our tutorial presenter, our speaker earlier. He's the secretary of the organization. If anyone would like to monitor the chat, we always appreciate it if somebody can keep eyes on the chat. Just let me know if you'd like to be the monitor, at least for tonight.
I'll monitor it.
Great, thank you, Grant. And topic wrangler. This is just in general, somebody to help us line up speakers. And I'll mention next Thursday night speaker in a moment. And again, speakers, yeah, we're always looking for somebody who would like to present, or even if you just have an idea for a topic, but you're not willing to present on it yourself. It's always interesting to hear what people want to hear. And if you have an idea who might be able to present on it, even better, but we'll try and find somebody if we have to. So with that announcements, this organization's next meeting is 8 days from now. It is next week on Thursday, and that is the STL St. Louis Linux meeting. Yes, who was that? One of our new people posted a question in chat a moment ago asking what was the difference between a new LUG meeting and the STL LUG meeting. That was Sebastian, I believe. And so the difference is the new LUG or the new Linux meeting. First, let me say the STL Linux meeting is a presentation similar to what we're having tonight. It's got slides, it's got a speaker on a specific topic, and if we talk about other things, that's just happenstance. The new Linux meeting is for, there's no specific topic. set out beforehand. And the rule of the game is whoever comes in and wants to say that they think of themselves as the newest user of Linux and they have a question, then the rest of our point is to try and answer that question as best we can and help that person understand what it is they're asking. So there's a lot of really good information that comes out of that. It's really amazing sometimes. So even though it's not a formal presentation prepared in advance, boy, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of there. And it's not just for new people, because as you can see, it really helps to have the old timers, if I can call them that, people who are familiar with Linux, because they're the ones who have to kind of come up with some of these answers. And the amazing thing is a lot of times the old timers are amazed because some other old timer will approach the problem completely differently with a completely different answer. And a lot of the old timers say they learn a heck of a lot being at the new Linux meeting. So by all means, everyone please come. That comes up 5 days after the STL Linux meeting. It's on the 4th Tuesday of the month. Quick reminder, Debbie and Tim long-term support ended already on June the 30th. We point that out because our main server, Bach, is running Debian 10, and we intend to upgrade it to Debian 12. So anybody who would like to be part of the team of volunteers to work on this, it's obviously a great exercise, and the fact that you're doing it with a bunch of other people, you got some people who are a little more experienced, or they've had experience on other things, and it makes for a lot more fun to learn with the group. So if you'd like to volunteer, there's a mail address right there, info@sluug.org. Drop an email in there, and somebody will get back with you, and we'll get you included in the team. Call for any other announcements. Any other announcements, Lee?
I think we're good.
Sam?
I don't want to put anybody in the corner. Never mind.
Okay. As I end these announcements, we'll have a little more quick Q&A before we start the next presentation. And then after that presentation, generally the group just keeps hanging around and people keep asking questions. So there was some talk earlier about the presentation archives. We try and record all of our fixed presentations. In other words, the Wednesday, Thursday night meeting. And we try and keep a copy of the slide deck, video, and we've been putting that up on our SLUUG.org resources, presentations, part of our homepage. So you can go there and look back and you'll see decades of presentations, or at least a number of years. We are just now starting to put that on YouTube as well. So that's kind of an upcoming effort there. We've already got some stuff out there. The breadth of our organization, there's actually a corporation called SLUUG, and kind of as part of that group, there's this general monthly meeting. As I say, this has always got, or almost always got, a fixed presentation, usually two of them. The new Linux meeting, the St. Louis Linux meeting is another fixed presentation one. The new Linux meeting, I told you about that a second ago. That's basically whoever's the newest person in Linux. Then we go through who the next newest is, ask questions. And then the Slack meeting, St. Louis Area Computer Club. This is a bit more hardware oriented. So we'll even attempt to deal with questions about, Microsoft or other things. So it's a little more oriented towards the hardware. Calendar. There is sluug.org/calendar. We try and keep a calendar of anything that we think our people are interested in. Since we're St. Louis based, traditionally that's had an emphasis on St. Louis type events, but since we're getting more and more people coming in online, we're also trying to cover events that aren't centered here in St. Louis, but that the type of material that our people are interested in. If you have a suggestion of something that should go out on the calendar, send it to editor@sluug.org. And there is the calendar. So that gives you an idea what's on it. The top lines are usually things that either cover the whole day, or sometimes they're historical references. Those are the ones that usually begin with a year in front of it. And then there's an hourly thing throughout the day. So, see, stands or anything else I should point out on the calendar? Oh, up there in the corner, yes. So there's actually 3 different calendars. One is our meetings, the ones that this organization runs. That's the one that Stan has highlighted right now. They're the ones that show up in red on there. And again, those are the meetings we run. Different one, click on the next one, Stan. Okay, those are St. Louis local meetings. It used to be in the old days, most of those were physical. There are still some that are physical. Some of them are now done by Zoom or Jitsi. So you have to actually kind of just look through them and see if it's available or not. And the other thing on there is need better glasses.
Stan, bump the font a couple times, would you, please?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Anyway, those are meetings which aren't specific to St. Louis.
Much better.
Yeah, much better, much better. So those are things we're definitely picking up off the web, as you notice from the names: Birmingham, Atlanta, Las Vegas. So these are meetings, again, that we've seen. They're available out by the network, and we're just thinking it's stuff that y'all may be interested in. Okay, I think that covers it.
Okay, I've lost my screen, folks. Where'd it go?
Okay. All right. Let's see. As I said earlier, one thing, Sebastian was nice enough to say this is his first time with our group. Hey, we always love new members. Anybody else who's new tonight, and Sebastian as well, if you care to either turn on your mic and just tell us where you found out about tonight, or if you're shy or don't have a microphone, maybe type it into chat. We're just interested in how you found out about us. What brought you here tonight? The topic, or just general interest, or whatever. So, not hearing anybody turn on their mic, but anytime you interrupt me, go right ahead. Otherwise, you can type it in chat.
Mailing list.
Mailing list. We run a couple mailing lists. The announced mailing list is very limited traffic. We usually just use it to announce important things, like we got a meeting this week or something like that. So you can subscribe to that. You probably won't get bothered more than 2 or 3 times a month. The discuss mailing list, on the other hand, is anybody who subscribes can submit, and it's basically just like being here as part of the Q&A part of the meeting. You can ask any question, make any opinion known, within reason of being technical and not political, whatever. There are some days, when there's no traffic. There are other days when, somebody asks something that's just a really hot topic, and all of a sudden there's 20 responses. So you get what you get. So the steering committee, if you like to see sausage being made, yes, join the steering committee. And
I love sausage.
So that's where we talk about, who we can get to be speakers, what type of talks we want, things like that. It's not an official position. It's just anybody who wants to help. The sysadmin list are the people who keep our machines running. And so it's a great place if you want to sharpen your sysadmin skills. As I said earlier, you wind up working with other people. They've done it differently.
But that's for somebody who wants to help us. If you have a general sysadministration question, you can ask that on Discuss.
Correct. So yeah, the sysadmin list is the sysadmin of our machines. So, but it does give you the experience that way. So, okay, next list or next slide. Call for help before we go. Let's see. Our members ask questions and sometimes provide answers. From novice to graybeards, all experience is valued. Various use cases are interesting and instructive. Questions precede answers. Questions can be asked on Discuss, and they can also be asked here verbally. What did you break recently? What might be able to help? What were you trying to do that gave this strange result? And what was the surprising or unusual answer to your problem? So if anybody has anything that they've broken recently, this week, this month, you want to tell us about it, cry a little bit, this is the opportunity.
I could jump on.
Sure, go Nick.
So it's a week or two ago, I had an issue with trying to clone a drive. And it was wrapped around a ZFS partition map. And I got some great advice, I believe it was from Tony, to follow some instructions to try to remove that wrapper so that I believe I used gparted. So gparted would see all of the partitions on the drive. And Tony, I see you're on. It actually worked. I was able to take that drive and clone it. I ended up using DD to do the cloning, but I just want to take a moment to thank you for that. Point me in that direction.
You're welcome.
And
I wasn't the one who did it, but whoever did, I'm sure they'd say you're welcome.
Yeah, it was an interesting exercise. I mean, it was a test before I had to clone something a lot more important, and I had some funny experiences in the past where my clones didn't work out the way that I intended them to work. In fact, in this go around, it was a Windows partition that I had to resize from a 4 terabyte drive to try to fit for this test in a 750 gig drive. So I used gparted to shrink the Windows partition, the C drive, but I couldn't get gparted to do the cloning. It wouldn't boot off of the clone drive. But I ended up using DD, and that worked perfectly. Took a while, but it worked.
Excellent.
Yeah, really.
which meeting was that at? Do you remember? Was it the Slack meeting or the new Linux user meeting that you asked
I think
that?
it was the new Linux users meeting about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's always good to have, your expertise actually helps someone else later on in the meeting, I'm sure. And it got a lot of brain cells juiced up and thinking about different possibilities.
I'm just glad it worked.
Yes. And sometimes the big issue is describing the problem. And, sometimes there are different ways to describe something that trigger knowledge from somebody else. Any more call for help?
While people are thinking, I'll do one final piece of info that I want to put in the announcements, and that is there are no dues to join this organization. And in fact, it's kind of just an automatic thing. If you are here for any two of the 4 set meetings, or even some of our special meetings, if you're here for any 2 meetings during the calendar year, you have the right to vote. And that's the only way we define membership. Other than that, it's unless we decide you're being rowdy, you're here at the meeting, and we welcome you, and we try and respect everybody's opinions on things, so at least technical opinions. With that, any other thing? By the way, there is like I said, there's an opportunity for questions after the main topic, so we can follow up on more of that. If anybody really needs to ask one right now, otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to our main speaker of the evening, and let's see, our main speaker is Lee Lammert. Lee is a principal at Omnitech, and Lee and his company have been incredible sponsors of the organization for years. As I say, he's hosting our machinery right now, our network connection, and Lee is always available to jump in and help whatever the technical needs are of the group. So we really appreciate it. And tonight, he's going to tell us his experience with artificial intelligence, fixing the firewall with Chat GPT. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
All right, Gary. Gary, thank you very much.
Hey, Lee, before you start.
Yeah.
I'm hearing some audio artifacts that sounds like somebody might be eating while having an open mic. Doing dinner?
It sounds
Great.
like pistachios.
Yeah, somebody needs to mute a
There we
mic.
go. There we go.
Thank you.
This time it's not me.
All right. Welcome. The whole point of this presentation is I've been playing around with Chat GPT and actually finding out some useful things and solving real problems with them. In this case, the example is a firewall problem. Let's talk about first, though, for a little bit. You know, what is Chat GPT? Well, it is an AI tool. It is called a chatbot because basically you have a conversation with it. You also consider it a virtual assistant. It was developed by OpenAI and launched on November 30th, 2022. We have heard a presentation last year, I think it was last year or last winter. It's based on a large language model, and it basically permits a user to start a conversation and then refine it, and hopefully you get a result that's useful. There are successive user prompts. There are different stages. Let's bring up a couple here for examples. You know, I asked the question, what is the best way to learn IP tables? And ChatGPT replied, a whole bullet list. Understand the basics, start with documentation, use visual tools, hands-on practice, use resources, analyze real-world scenarios, stay updated, document your learning. To most people, it's common sense, but if you're a newbie, you know, there's some good options here. Hands-on practice, set up a virtual machine. Begin with basic tasks. You know, it gives you an outline. And that was all based on a simple question. What's the best way to learn IP tables? If you want to change it, you can edit it and run it again. What is the best way to learn? Let's try Linux. That's for the heck of it. And you can get another script. Very similar steps. You know, we're using very similar topics here, so a lot of the bullet points are common to both. But the point is, it's a conversation. You call it conversation or chat, whatever floats your boat. Now, the big gotcha with any AI tool is what's termed domain-specific knowledge. And if you want to ask a question of an AI tool, it doesn't know what you're doing. So you have to give it enough information to figure out what you want to do. If you want to ask a question about networking, you have to provide enough information for ChatGPT to assemble the data that it has available so that it understands networking first before it can address your question. That's very important. You have to be able to understand the answers that ChatGPT or the chatbot is providing and then modify your question so you might be able to usable answer. One of the most important one is you have to be able to tell when the chatbot's hallucinating. Yeah, last year I said I had it write a couple. I was having a problem and I was writing a bash script to automate something, and I asked ChatGPT to write it. The script didn't work. That's what's called a hallucination. I got enough ideas to build from that though. And then you have to be able to recognize an answer that's useful, apply it, and test and verify. All right, if anybody wants to follow along, you point your browser to chatgpt.com. You can, I think it's 4 or 5 conversations a day or something like that for free. I pay $20 a month. That gives you access to a lot of stuff you don't get for free. You know, you get access to different Chat GPTs. There's a 4.0, which is the current one. There's a mini, which is a little faster, a legacy GPT-4. You've also got things like website generators, logo creators. You know, you can work with photos. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. But let's get back to the point we're looking at. If you want to save a logo, if you want to set up a login, you can save sessions. But one of the other things it gives you is when you are working with Chat GPT, you see the little arrow up here, share chat. You can use that to get a link to actually download the chat. Here's the one we're going to look at today. Or no, here's iptables learning. I downloaded it so we can have it offline. Here is the quickie the other day. I forgot how to put an iptables at the top of the input list. So I asked ChatGPT, what is the iptables rule to immediately drop all traffic from an IP? Here's the rule. And it works. Next one here, this is one we're going to be working with today. So I'll get into that here in a few minutes. Here is the one that somebody has asked about. How do I rename a network interface on Red Hat 9? As the point, you can do it with IP link. The point Grant made was this isn't persistent, but there's other ways to do it. You can modify the ifconfig rule and put a device equals in the ifconfig file, and that should be a permanent rename. The example here is a network we've got here in the Batcave. It's kind of complicated for people. I'll show you a diagram here in a second, but to start off with, we have a server room. 30 years ago, it was 2 ISDN lines. Once we got rid of modem, then Ethernet over copper for about 20 years. Now it's AT&T dedicated internet, 20 meg, in the process of switching to 50 meg because it's cheaper. And then the office has a non-dedicated internet access that runs at a higher speed. For 30 years, we've had Charter, 300 up, 300 down, and 10 up. A couple factors about Charter. It has a public IP. So the firewall box has a public IP for the default route. We have multiple internal networks. I think 3 of them, if I remember correctly. There's a firewall box between them as a standard PC with 3 network interfaces. And historically, that firewall box routed traffic directly to the DMZ. Here's a picture of it. Our server's in the back, that's the DMZ. We have a class C, 206.197.251/24. Currently, that is running on dedicated fiber. Office here internally also shares the same firewall. I'm sorry, doesn't share the same firewall, but the firewall is also connected to the server. This firewall box has 3 NICs. It has a 206 IP from the server side. It has basically the main internal network, 10.0.0, and it had a public IP from Charter. Worked great forever. The only problem was every few years the Charter modem would go bonkers, and I'd have to play games, rebooting them 2 or 3 times to try to get the firewall to pull a DHCP address from Charter. Sometimes I set it manually, and it was a nightmare because Charter support was worthless. They didn't even know what DHCP was. or how their system worked.
Yeah, I had the same experience where Charter couldn't tell me what IP address they were assigning me.
Yeah, because
yeah.
nobody knows. It's all DHCP.
Right, but they couldn't even look in their records and see what it was now. So that's why I switched to AT&T recently. Not
Yeah.
fiber, but it works.
Well, the problem with AT&T until fiber rolled out is the speeds were so slow that Charter was a no-brainer.
Agreed, but if I needed higher when I was working, it was a real problem. But once I retired, I thought, okay, Spectrum, you're done.
Well, we had about 6, 7 weeks ago, I woke up one morning and there was a black wire hanging between the two phone poles behind our house. And I walked out there and looked at it and it said fiber. I said, wow, AT&T's here. About a month later, somebody came, I called AT&T a couple times and went online and said, hey, when can you get services? What service? Nobody knew there was service here, even though the fiber was on the pole. So about a month after that happened, a nice chap came walking down, came knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell. I said, hey, would you like fiber? I said, come on in here, my friend, and sit down. I've been waiting for you for a month. So what we did was the server side is unchanged. The servers are still the same. It has a dedicated link. Again, right now it's ADI. The upgrade was now upgraded to 1 gig and has a ONT. If nobody's seen that before, it's optical network termination. And the firewall interface in the firewall box, I switched to 2.5 gig 10 base T, pulled a Cat6 cable from that firewall to the ONT. And if we're looking at the config options, there was a server mode in the ONT where the ONT would have the public IP and it would forward any incoming traffic. You can either forward all or you can forward specific ports to a server on the internal network. Because of that mode, I also have 3 extra full speed 2.5 or 2.5 gig ports on the optical box that I can just pop a cable in, and I've got the full network speed without fooling anything here in the office. So that seemed to provide an advantage. This is the ONT here in the back room. The green line is the fiber plug from the garage. A lot of fun running 100-foot fiber cord. Woo. The purple one is the Cat6 to the firewall box. And you can see the 3 yellow ones here, which are the open ports should I need a high-speed link for any device in the office. All I have to do is grab it, plug it in there. It'll pick up a 192, 168, and you're good to go. So
that is a fiber modem.
It's called ONT, optical network termination.
Okay.
Here's the fiber line down here, the green plug. I forget what the identifier of it is, but it's very common. The AT&T guy originally installed it out in the garage, but then I realized that I could have 4 ports on it. So I moved the box down here and pulled a separate 100-foot fiber patch cord from here out to the garage.
The green is referred to as angled polished connector, or APC for short. And it is an SC, as in subscriber connector, is the physical size of it. And it's a very, very, very standard part. And Lee, I presume you use the Amazon link I pointed you at to order the proper link.
Yeah, but I found out later that they have a different one for a little more, for $10 more. And you get one that's actually in a shield.
Okay.
Which would have been a lot better to pull because of the physical conductor itself. The light conductor is a lot more robust. In fact, they actually show you, bending it over itself and putting a pull cord on the bend, which amazed the dickens out of me. But anyway, that aside, and I really, I do appreciate the hint, because that gave me the idea to move it downstairs. But
Yeah,
anyway,
so that purple wire above the green one there is basically your internal network that happens to go through the firewall you're showing there.
correct, right here.
But okay, so it kind of, I guess the basics of my question was that box in the upper left is kind of sort of the modem that
Yeah,
you had with
optical modem.
previously had with Spectrum, but it's no longer their Spectrum coax. It's now a fiber.
Except it's about 4 times the size.
Yeah, because it looks kind of beefy.
Yeah, it is. It's about 10 inches tall, 4 inches thick, and 8 or 9 inches deep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So make sure you have a shelf big enough to put it on.
Well, that's actually hanging on the wall. They give you it comes with a right angle bracket. You screw to the wall, and then the strap here holds it on the bracket so it doesn't fall off.
That does not come with all of them. It did not come with mine. So, and I have the same ONT.
Huh. I bet it was in the kit, and the tech either had unboxed it before or didn't bother to give it to you. And it's interesting though, this is the same physical box that I've got in 2 clients, in 2 client locations that have recently upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you learn this box, it works for any non-dedicated service.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody's got a handle on that. The issue here is when I plugged in the network cable to the fiber box, I had to fool around with Firewall a little bit since I changed the interface names, but I got everything up and running very quickly. And I thought it was working fine for a couple of weeks. And then I have a little script on the firewall box. Let me find my tab here. Let's see, this is the script. It's not too big. Actually, about 8 years ago, my good friend Chuck was hanging around here, and he built probably 80% of it. So he's got to give credit for that, but he didn't want credit because I think some of it was kind of ugly. But anyway, this is what's been running for 8 years. I play with it a little bit. At one point, our alarm company needed access to manage the panel remotely, but since then they've gone to cloud service, so I don't even need to open the ports anymore. Most of it's fairly simple, and one of the things we did find out was every once in a while it stopped working at one point, a couple of years after we had done it, and come to find out that when we did it, IP forwarding for some reason was on by default, and then all of a sudden it was turned off after an update. So once we figured out what was going on, Chuck put the force in here, where every time you run the script, it sets IP forward to 1. Anyway, this is the IP table script, and Hermes is the Cisco router in the back room that handles the server side. Notice that, well, actually, at one point, I was seeing a delay because every day, every hour, I'm going from the internal network to the mail server, which is in the rack in the back. And I was seeing some pretty long delays. At some time it was like 2 or 3 seconds. I do something and wait a long time for a reply. And I got a little bit peeved at it at one point, and I started doing investigating. I was seeing ping times like 40, 50, 80 seconds, sometimes over, or milliseconds, sometimes over a second. So I did a trace route and noticed that trace route from internal to DMZ was going out the default route. 1.254 is the ONT, the fiber modem, and it was going out on the fiber, coming back around, and then coming in through AT&T on the network side, which is not good. So I think we've covered most of this. ONT, like I say, using the private IP network, gave me access to the 3 other ports on the box. And when I did it, I didn't think there was a problem, but when I found a problem, then I wanted to fix it. That means the default route is now an off-net route. The firewall IP is 1.100. The ONT is 1.254.
What do you, Lee? What do you mean by off route?
Off-net 192.168 is a private IP address. It's technically called off-net. It's not routable.
Okay.
Just like 10.192.168, and there's a 172 Class B. This is the Class C. Okay. So the issue is the default route should not be carrying DMZ traffic, right? Because normally the trace route should be right there. In fact, did I have that over here? In other words, from here to the rack is 1 hop, 0.9 milliseconds. From my workstation, it's 1.2 milliseconds. It's actually 2 hops because the Marvel is the firewall box. He's in the middle. That's the way it should look. Not, 30, what do we got here? Overall time, 2, 3.5, 5, 15, 20, like 25 milliseconds. Not acceptable. So I started to play with it. I started to play with some of the rules. And I figured out part of it, but I couldn't figure out the rest of it. So I decided, well, let's ask Chat GPT. Here we go. Given this network configuration, and I'm just asking about internal, external, and DMZ, because those are the 3 interfaces here on the firewall. In other words, one's the DMZ, one's the internal, one's the external. What are the IP table statements to redirect traffic from intern to DMZ for the subnet of the rack in the DMZ? And ChatGPT said, well, first, make sure forwarding's on. That we did. Notice that this isn't the right way to do it, though, because proc is transient. So every time you reboot the machine, it's going to go away. Which is why I put the statement in the IP tables. And so we want to modify fixed firewall. The intern interface is ETH2, the DMZ is ETH0, and this is the subnet out there. So basically we want an IP tables rule on the forward chain from internal net to destined for the DMZ of that subnet accept. And then on the return hop, we want to accept packets coming back. If they're established, accept them on the way back. And again, this is Chat GPT. One try with two setup prompts, and then the question. Amazed the devil out of me, I tell you. And you even get a good explanation here. So I tried that. And let's see, I have, so that's the original. One is the updated one. Or no, let's jump over the rugby. Let's jump over to Marvel. Okay, here's the updated script. I have my subnet defined. Here are the two statements. In other words, accept traffic from DMZ to subnet and accept established traffic from DMZ to intern. Right? You might see a problem with that. It didn't work.
On the surface, I agree with the rules, but that's in a vacuum, and I have not analyzed the rest of your tables. So,
well, I asked Chat GPT. Sorry, does not work. All traffic incoming on intern still routes to extern, the default gateway. What could be wrong? This is the exact problem that the ONT created, because the private IP on the firewall will not trigger forwarding because it is an off-net address and it is not a route. So you have to add a static route to that 206 subnet, to the DMZ on ETH0. And let's see, accept. And so those are the rules we had up top. If we looked at the route and added a route, and let's see, we got IP forward still. So basically, I added a route down here. IP route add subnet via ETH0. Which added the static route here. And that fixed the problem.
I understand why it fixed it. I don't understand how you got to a scenario where the 206 address, where you didn't have an address, or I'm sorry, a route for a locally attached link.
Because there is no route if you just have an IP address. That's
go back to your prompt. You should have it. Go back to your command prompt. IP route show table local.
his IP address is 252 on the DMZ side.
Mm-hmm. So you should have inherently had something happen to your routing table, because Linux by default, when you add an IP address to an interface, it adds the local and the broadcast and the network for the interface for the network you're adding to the interface. And the route command that it had you do was re-adding that local subnet.
I understand what you're saying, except it did work when the default route was a public IP.
Right, it doesn't matter. So the default route on Marvel, which is your firewall, is where it sends traffic that it doesn't have another route to. That's where default comes into play.
Right.
It should have had a route to the 206 subnet as directly attached off one of the interfaces. And if it lost that route somehow, yeah, it would fall back to the default. But bouncing that interface or rebooting the router, I'm sorry, the firewall, should have brought that IP address and route back. So
yeah, it didn't. I don't that I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I understand why it had you run that command. I don't understand how you got into a situation where you needed to run it, because like you could recreate your problem by removing the 206 from your local routing table and anyone you added from the main routing table, which is what you're showing there. IP route delete at IP in front of it.
Okay.
So do IP route show table local. And so the ETH0 interface, can you shut it down, like if config that interface down and then if config that interface back up without adversely affecting what you're doing?
I do it fast enough.
Fair enough. Now, sure. And there's functionally back. Take it down, show your local route table, and bring it back up. And I bet while it's down, that local 206.197 won't be there. I'm surprised it.
Yeah, it's down.
Okay.
So it's still in the route table.
All right. A different kernel version. When you took it down, okay, it's still there.
What is this? Is 5.14 still?
Yeah.
I haven't upgraded it.
Fair. If you want to play, I would remove that IP from it, make sure the route's gone, re-add the IP, bring the interface up, and it should come back automatically. But I don't want to hijack the presentation.
No, that's okay. As long as that's the only thing I take down.
Yeah. IP adder delete the 206, whatever it is. Space dev ETH0. So, and it should be gone. Do an IP adder show. And it is, I no longer see it on there. Do an IP route show table local. And it is gone. Now do an IP adder add, yeah, and add your /24 on the end of the IP. And make sure the link is up.
Did he come up?
Scroll up a little bit.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's up.
Do an IP route show table local. and you have your local and your broadcast back, which is what I would expect. Try pinging it from that machine, and then I'm surprised you have that. Sort of surprised you have that device route in your main table, but only mildly. Try the ping from your, or trace route from your work.
Hang on a second. No, it's still there. I don't know. So why would it work now when it hasn't worked for last month?
I don't know.
I don't even, yeah, it's weird.
Do you get the feeling that there's aliens inside the networking system?
No, not aliens. I would actually. So Lee, was your old non-server internet connection, your whatever you had that you replaced with the ONT, was it statically configured?
Yes.
I would be willing to bet your DHCP client is to blame for this messing with your routing table when it brought up the.
Oh, okay. That's the other way around. It was DHCP originally. The charter interface was DHCP, which is a major pain in the butt because they change IPs like once every 2 years.
Yeah.
And when it changes, sometimes it'll grab it, sometimes it won't. So the DH client on the charter IP actually fixed the routing table when it got an IP, whereas now when it's static, it won't. Is that what we're concluding?
Well, I was going with your DHCP client was messing with something, but maybe it's too little too late to truly diagnose what happened because we can't easily reproduce it. But stock Linux network, when you have the 206.197.251.252/24 on an interface, you should have your main IP plus the network and the broadcast in the local table.
Okay.
So something squirrely, and the route command it gave you re-added one of those 3 routes. So it gave you the right answer, but 0 hints as to how you got into a situation where it wasn't there.
Got it. Okay, well, Chat GPT was happy and it worked, so.
Well, you didn't ask that question. Why did if you asked, why do I need that command? Then maybe you would have answered.
This setup ensures any traffic from intern destined for the 206 routes through the DMZ.
That is not completely accurate, but yeah. Like if you've got a system on intern that actually uses a default router, the box you're working on won't see the traffic.
Right.
I have a question. Why do you need that inbound or that one, the one that's the established one? Why do you need that? I thought that once you established a connection that like replies were automatically good to go. So why do you need that bottom line there, the very bottom one?
No, raw IP tables the inbound reply by default is not allowed. You allow it with established or other more explicit rules.
Yeah, well, to answer your question, a lot of tools, if you create this scenario, it'll automatically create the reply scenario.
Mhm.
But if you're doing it at the lower level like this, you have to create both of them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is interesting is established, yes. Why is it still telling you to add related? Related is, as far as I'm concerned, mostly not needed anymore. That was for things like FTP where it was multi-port and you had NAT helpers in kernel to realize, oh, this other new flow is about to come through. It's related to an existing flow. And for the last number of years, I've actually had those related and established as separate rules for counters. And related is such a small, the counter on related is such a small number compared to established. Lately, I've not even been putting related, and I have not found any problems with it.
Yeah, can you ask it that? I'm curious what it would say about why that is related. If you saw this chat somewhere.
Gremlins.
Are they from the Kremlin?
Okay, everybody, anybody have any questions about the problem, the solution, or anything else we can answer?
Have you compared Chat GPT to like Gemini or the Bing one?
No, I would not touch a Microsoft product if you paid me. Oh, and I have not. I do not use Google either.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think the Microsoft one is the best one on the market because it uses Chat GPT under the hood, but also it provides references. I was subscribed to the Chat GPT one, but not providing references makes me not trust it compared to Gemini and Bing, which do provide sources. So I can click on the sources and know if it's hallucinating to me or not. So just something to consider. I understand your hangups about it though.
No, it's not a hang up. It's just I don't have I have a habit of not using those manufacturers, so I don't know. Gemini, I don't even know how I use it. You want to show it for a second?
It's just the same, Gemini.google.com or something. It's like the exact same. It just gives links at the bottom. So it'll give you a link at the bottom of like where it pulled the answer from. Bing does the same thing. It gives you a link at the bottom. And I usually, if it's even slightly off, I will I'll click the links and double check. Or a lot of times I'll ask the same question to like multiple AIs at the same time, and that way I can like, I'm hoping they're not all going to hallucinate the same way at me. So if they're different, then I can hopefully spot the hallucinations. Sometimes I do that too.
Interesting. Gemini created a whole set of rules here. And let's see. Google Tag Manager is the only obnoxious JavaScript.
Yeah, the thing about Gemini's claim to fame is it's got a much bigger context window. So you can put a lot bigger prompt with a lot more data, but I haven't really found a use for that yet. Yeah, so There's the references I was talking about down there.
These two blue boxes down here, what you were talking about, that's where it got its information?
At least some of it, yeah. At least some of the information from this will have come from those links. Yeah.
Okay.
Dan, did you have a question?
Yes. Is under Brave, they have a thing called Leo. Is that a chat AI of some kind? Anybody know?
Yeah, Brave is adding some AI to their search or going to be, so I'm sure they have something.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if it's Leo. I personally I'm not a fan of the chat. Yeah, any of them.
So the really cool thing that I want to try next, so both Gemini and ChatGPT have the thing now where you can just have a conversation with them. So you download the app and you can start up just a regular conversation, and like it'll start responding to you after you ask a question, and you can like interrupt it by like asking a follow-up question. So it'll notice that you're talking now, so it'll shut up, and then it'll respond to your follow-up question that you interrupted it with and stuff like that. So I think that could be really interesting, like, you know, while I'm doing the dishes or something, just kind of, you know, quizzing, or, you know, while I'm driving down the highway or something, you know, quizzing Chat GPT about something that I need to understand for work or whatever, you know.
Okay, might have to try it. So maybe other people are interested. Maybe we can have a shootout here at a future session. Come up with some good use cases and compare Chat GPT and Gemini.
A friend of mine was saying he was using Chat GPT for what I would have used a search engine for, and I asked him why he used it, and his response was because it has fewer ads.
I don't see ads anyway. That's why I don't use Chrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I wish that I would like, whenever I Google something now, I want like a little nag box to like come up and say, "Are you sure you wouldn't rather ask an AI about this?" Because you know, because I still find myself Googling things out of habit when I can generally get a better answer more quickly from asking an AI.
I'm tending to add, I think it's UDM equals 14 to the end of a URL for Google to turn off their AI.
To turn it off?
Yeah, when you do a search in google.com, it is including AI results by default. If you append ampersand UDM equals 14, I believe, it redoes the query without AI results.
Why would you use Google in the first place?
Reasons. I still find that Google has the deepest and best corpus for much of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, but you've got an order of magnitude more crap to wade through to find something that's useful.
The things I'm searching for are domain specific enough. It's usually not that much crap. I mean, it's the same 5 basic tutorials, copy pasta, season to flavor, but I still find it's better. I've tried DuckDuckGo. I have been using Brave recently, and I keep finding things that they have 1 or 2 results that are no value. And if I go to Google as a fallback, I find 1 to 2 orders of magnitude more germane results.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sold on AI yet, at least for the work that I do, which is technical. I feel that although slower, I enjoy combing through the forums and maybe posting some, you know, item-specific issues I'm having before I rely solely on some of the feedback that I've received. Like, for instance, one of the queries that I recently posted to Gemini was creating a split, a WireGuard split VPN tunnel. And no matter how much information I gave it, and it was specific to my hardware, DNS servers that was set up on the network, things like that, I feel like I just can't rely on. But a lot of other things, the good apple pie recipe and stuff, hasn't failed me.
Yeah, it's really, you know, AI is the best at idea generation, right? Like just giving you ideas that you can go build on like yourself. Like obviously Lee is like a old hat at giving things presentations, but you know, like before I give a presentation, I usually ask an AI like, hey, what are some tips to make a presentation, you know, more interactive or more engaging, right? And it's just going to rattle off, you know, 5 or 10 ideas, and I'm probably going to throw away, you know, 80% of them, but there might be 1 or 2 that I actually incorporate, you know?
Yeah, no, I kind of like the Gemini reply here better than chatbot, only because it organized the rules better. Because you've got all your allow established in one stanza, then you've got individual for traffic allows, and then you got NAT on a separate one down here with comments.
Yeah, and you didn't give this one your pre-prompts with your subnet and all that. You didn't do that on this one. I wonder if you did that, if you'd get even better result or
Yeah,
what.
I probably would. Okay. All right, anybody else?
Someone mentioned that it shows the references that where it's pulling this information from. Does it? I don't see that there. So,
Yeah, these little squares down here at the bottom, they're all the references down here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that I like. I mean, so you can basically dig a little deeper by clicking on one of those links and kind of get an idea that it's culminating data from, you know, recent. Because I had some issues with that too. Like I always wondered where is it pulling a lot of its knowledge base from? You know, what versions and things like that. Because I've had it come back with technical questions that probably would have worked if I was on a certain version 3 or 4 years ago, but not necessarily the one I'm on now. So I kind of like that it provides the references that it's putting out. Either way, it gives you a good baseline, right, to build off of. Puts you in the right direction.
Sebastian had a good comment in the chat. AI is especially helpful when you're unfamiliar with the subject, as it often provides a solid starting point and guides you toward better understanding. And I think that is probably true. I've just seen some very questionable hallucinations. And things that I've seen recommendations from areas that I consider myself on more skilled than the average person, I would not encourage what it is encouraging.
Yeah, but I think for tech stuff, it's so easy, like especially for code, right? Because with code, it's going to give me a suggestion and I'm immediately going to test it out, right? Like I'm immediately going to type it into my IDE and I'm immediately going to run it or run the tests or whatever. And I'm immediately going to see whether it was a good, whether it was, you know, hallucination or not. Or either that or my IDE itself is going to flag it as, you know, or the compiler will flag it as, hey, this won't even run, you know? And so I just think for code and for stuff like that, that you're immediately going to test it out is just so good for that. You know, versus, you know, a lawyer, you don't want to, you know, if you think about the feedback loop for a lawyer, you know, how you know, use something that Chat GPT said, then you try it in a court, and then, the feedback loop is so much longer, so it's so much costlier, the hallucination. So anyway, I think us attacker in the
I think one of the most recent things I've seen was like asking which number is larger, 9.11 or 9.2. And the AI said 9.11 is a bigger number than 9.2. Like it doesn't have basic math.
Haley, would you mind typing that in right here? Is there any could we try that right now? I'm just curious.
I think the reason on the number thing is because it's designed around a language interpretation instead of a mathematical interpretation of what you asked. The question is what does larger mean in language compared to which is a larger mathematical number. So which takes up more space on the written line when you type it out.
There, which is larger, 9.11 or 9.20?
Oh, 20. Oh, come on. How do I get? I can't.
Yeah, did they say 9? Do they mean to say 9.02?
No. I can try to find the screenshot of it.
Hang on a second. Why can I not edit the prompt?
It's hallucinating in a weird way.
Your cursor is at the beginning of the line. Can you just?
No, I can't move it.
Sebastian, if you have a microphone, go ahead and jump in.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks first for your interesting presentation. Well, I found this group through Meetup, but I want to share a little bit how I got here. I knew that no Linux group or community will find me. So one afternoon, I set out to find out as many English-speaking Linux communities as I could. Because I'm a software development student from Peru, I'm really passionate about Linux. So my goal is to learn as much as I can to improve my community and sharing how awesome Linux is. So, like I was saying, it's great to find communities like this because back home, the only group I have near, it's like Windows theme, and I'm not like interested in that. And connecting with interesting and I don't know, more with more people with more experience with Linux is really important to me. So I'm eager to improve my English while diving deeper into my Linux journey. So that's who I am.
Cool. Welcome to the group. Sign up to the mailing list, ask questions, join the meeting.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Sebastian. We appreciate your inputs.
Where's home?
Peru.
Peru.
Interesting. Cool.
Latin America. Yeah.
Are you there now, connecting remotely, or are you here?
Yes, I am Peruvian based right now.
Okay. Cool. So I think we're international now.
Metal for furthest distance.
I think so. Sebastian, we were just doing a quick calculation. We think you get the medal for the farthest distance attendee tonight. So
Cool.
Go ahead and give him the cookie that is the bookend and squishy middle.
Just a reminder, these meetings are video recorded and it will be posted on our archives page. And at some point they'll be punched up on YouTube.
Yeah, what I would say is that, and also, if you like doing these things, don't think you need to be like a 30-year-old, a veteran of the industry like Lee in order to give presentations too. Like, even beginners to Linux can give good presentations and give their spin on things as well. So, if that is something that interests you, I'm sure you would have something worthwhile to share, maybe, whenever you think you're ready.
That would be awesome.
All right, anybody else specifically, or should we stop the recording?
Well, I'm going to ask you to repeat something you said earlier. I had somebody send me a direct message asking how they could participate or shoulder surf the Bach upgrade. So if you could do that 45-second spiel again.
Okay. Basically, we have a Bach is a VM here in the shop, and it is Debian 10. Obviously needs upgrades, but we have a couple of interesting situations. Number one, we found out when we did a test that if we do a dist upgrade from 10 to 11, Mailman goes away because it's Python 2. I think Mike came up with a solution, but we haven't tested it yet. But the bigger problem is we're thinking we want to go to Mailman 3 because Mailman 2 goes away with Debian 11. But I believe somebody said that Mailman 2 comes back in Debian 12. So
I thought that was postfix admin. And
it might have been, Grant. But anyway, we've got some significant issues to work out. And I'm not sure we have a good work plan right now.
So Sebastian is asking in the chat, where can he get more information about participating, the notes and everything? Like if he wanted
join sysadmin, probably. We do most of our discussions on sysadmin, and you can look through the archives there and see all of our discussions for the past 6 months.
Pretend I've forgotten how to join sysadmin. How would I do that?
Send an email to me and I'll drop you in there because it's a hidden list.
Okay. And info at, or what address should be used?
Info's fine. Stan can forward it to me.
Okay.
Thanks, Grant.
Yep. Team effort.
Yeah, there you go. Sean put it in the chat.
And if you're subscribed to Discuss, you could very easily say, hey, how do I get subscribed to sysadmin or SteerCon or whatever, or would you please? And almost certainly somebody will get your message to the right people.
Okay. Well, any other questions that we need to discuss tonight? I've heard a couple of suggestions that we can shut down the recording at least. Any objections to shutting down at this point? Hearing none. Okay, I'm going to suggest this is going to be the end of the recording for tonight. This is Wednesday, August the 14th, 2024. It is the monthly St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group, SLUUG. It's our general meeting monthly. And our presentations tonight, Ken Johnson did the basic tutorial on the front of the meeting. His topic was KVM for beginners, kernel virtual machines. And our main topic tonight was done by Lee Lammert. And Lee told us all about using, or I should say, fixing firewalls with Chat GPT. A little use of AI and all this. So, very current topic. Thanks to both presenters. Thanks to all of you who were here tonight. So many of you contributed, both typing stuff in or voicing stuff over the thing, and everybody did great contributions. So thank you all for coming. And next Thursday night is the St. Louis Linux user group meeting. It also will be a presentation style meeting. However, I don't yet have a specific title, topic, speaker. So yes, if anyone would like to volunteer, contact me or contact editor at slug.org and we'll get something set up. Otherwise, in the next day or so, I'm sure I'll get something nailed down and we'll get a speaker and a topic set for next week.
Just don't nail your foot.
Pardon me?
Just don't nail your foot.
Ouch. Okay, thank you all. And we'll turn off the recording.